is what allows the actual game to exist. If there's no real strong narrative, you're not really getting a lot out of it. So I really like the idea of places where you could have that grayscale morality where there's no one true correct answer. And that's one of those. I mean, it's a style that's not for everybody because it really forces you to think about everything you do and what consequence will come with it. But like, to me, that is a phenomenal way of storytelling, because no matter what happens, there's always going to be a next step in the story that comes with it.
Exactly. There's always going to be that next step, that next level. And like all great stories, like no matter what style of gameplay you do, it's going to be so character driven, because it's all that play to lift, that yes and mentality when you're in the moment and you're really, you know, getting into those really gritty scenes. And when you get permission, you know, that sense of humility as a player, but as a player is it makes for an amazing scene where now that person has to pay it forward, and it's a certain energy that is in a room. You know, it's kind of like when you're when you do live improv on a stage, when you're building off of one another's energy, and now they're saying this, and you're allowing the people the space to take that persona, that mindset, that character, and drive a story forward. And you're going, yes, that was phenomenal. And also,
and I think when it comes to these kinds of things, like these kinds of games, the level of communication of, like you were saying, of like that agreeing, that acceptance, that bringing it to the table, saying like, this is where we want to go with this. Are you on board? Like, do you want to take this to that direction? That kind of formal communication on top of building that story is really the best way to kind of sell when you're getting that down and dark. Because if you're going to start fighting with somebody over moral issues, it can tug right here real fast. And if you don't have that pre-negotiated like understanding of like, you and I, we're gonna be cool after this, but I'm about to tell you your entire belief system's wrong. Like, you got to be ready for that. And even with those negotiations, because I know we came from a long time ago when it was, you're in it the whole way. There's no negotiating beforehand. You just got to accept that what happens is what's happening, and that's that. That's an old generation of game style. Like, it doesn't really work now anymore, because we're going through new generations of gamers, new generations of LARPers. We're seeing new styles come out, and some of them get outdated, but that's honestly okay. I think it's great that we've got this new dynamic where you can negotiate those terms in situations. And honestly, it makes PvP way better. It's going to make it more fun when you can know, like, we're doing this to have fun, not because one of us is trying to win over the other. And that's when you get into things like playing to lose, or like you said, playing to lift. It's all the same thing, because I know at the end of the day, I'm going in knowing I'm wrong about my answer, but that's what I want. I want to be wrong and try to prove I'm right. And at the end of the day, we're going to come to something that makes it more interesting, not even just for us, but for everybody that's watching us. Because in all of it, we're on a stage. It's a fishbowl. Whatever was going on, somebody else is seeing it. And so, you know, that makes it better when you have that forethought to know we're just putting on a show. You got that yes and, you have that yes but or no but or whatever form you're taking of like negotiative role play or negotiative storytelling. And in the end of the day, like, that's what sells the story, to make it feel real.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. You know, we definitely love that building on one another power, and giving people, again, that permission, like we were saying previously, to really do big things. And of course, like you were saying, you know, we do come from that different time, and that's fine. You know, we came from that time where people didn't ask for those permissions, but, you know, and we, you know, as a community have learned the hard way, you know, the repercussions of that stuff sometimes as well. And we lost a lot of good people unnecessarily because of that. So to actually have a system where it's like, listen, it's okay to have this conversation. Like what we're trying to promote right now in the trials, especially being that, you know, we haven't had a game yet, so we have to talk in what we are going to do, is we always tell people, listen, you know, as far as, you know, the rules and such are concerned, they're guidelines. They're put into place to because we're a what you see is what you get kind of game. Like they're like you're saying, like every LARP, you know, everything's what you see is what you get. The things that we can't do because of just mundane physics or reality, that's when the rules come into play. But that at all other times, it's all up to negotiation. You know what? If me and Joe Schmo are fighting, and Joe just happens to be a better fighter than I am, and we're having a conversation before the game, and we're like, hey, you know, it'd be great. And Joe might tell me, you know, you go and you kick my ass because that would be great for this story. And we negotiate that scene out where that might not have played out the way if it just came push comes to shove, you know, in an old school traditional sense where we would just roll up on one another, throw a couple words, and now we're just swinging foam at one another, and then somebody's going to fall, you know? So it allows for those stories to be built on top of it. You know, some of us are more comfortable in that mindset, of impromptu and doing all that. Some people aren't. So to give them that half a beat, you know, that to say, hey, you know what, if this is what's going to happen, I think I'm going to play like this, and really have that foresight as to what's going to happen. They know what's going to happen. And then on top of it, you don't feel cheated, even if you are the one that's on the losing end of this particular situation. You're going to say, hey, you know what, but I had control over how I lost because I agreed to it. So now that animosity that might have been once, you know, is not going to be. And I think that's a really cool space to be in. It's different. It's totally different. And it's a learning experience for me. It's a learning experience for everybody. I mean, people who remember me from Dystopia Rising, their heads probably spinning like, wait a minute, did he say consent? Like, as far as like what to say, like I'm fairly sure you've said, I'm like, yeah, I know what I said, you know, and that's why I'm saying what I'm saying right now. Like, you know,
there's evolution there. I'm sure we said it forever ago, but you know what? You either die a dinosaur and go extinct, or you evolve.
100%. Now, I have a question, kind of like moving on with the thoughts about this. So now we're talking about how, you know, we how a passion started, how we started with the gaming, and how we create our characters in the process. Now, for you personally, what changed? Because there's a difference between, you know, being a player and becoming a marshal, where you're just being a little more active. Maybe you're a rules marshal, even, you know, creating mods. But what happened in your head? What was that switch where you were just kind of like, you know what, like I want to take on this assistant director role, because that's a whole nother hat.
So a lot of my, almost from the start, my experience of gaming in general was, you get those two schools of thought. I suffered because, and so everyone else has to, or I suffered and I want no one else to ever experience that. And I firmly stand in the I suffered so no one else should kind of realm. And so from the start, I came in and really had a bad time. Like, my first LARP experience was the worst thing in the world. It was literally awful. And I came back from that going, that sucked. I don't ever want that to happen again. I'm going to go back and I'm going to make it fun for me. And so I went back and I kept doing that because I don't believe that it's not possible for me to like make it enjoyable. And so if I can do that for me, then I can do it for other people. And so it did really kind of start from the very beginning that like I want to help. And so I started with the marshal, and then, you know, moved up into the realm of officer. But really what sold the assistant director side, which really what really brought me into just accepting when James asked me, James being the director of Night Realms, was I had already been doing a lot of work because I just want to make it better for everyone else. I always want to give everyone else the better experience than I had. Even now, like, I could have a great event. I want the next one to be better. And it's always, there's never perfect. There's always striving to make it better than before. And that's not a bad thing. That's just like my way of doing it. And so I don't think there was any like singular moment that made me say, no, this is what I want to do. It's always been this kind of gradual, like, sure, I can do that. I've worked at this. I can do this comfortably. Let me take on a little more. I'm at a point where I can do this comfortably. Let me take on a little more. And so it just kind of kept building and building until I'm more or less was doing the job without the title and finally James was like, might as well slap a name on it.
There you go, right?
And so like
awesome.
It fulfills me to watch everyone else have a good time. And so like it's more or less a natural thing to have fallen into that role.
Absolutely. Yeah, see, my thing is I feel like I'm the perpetual storyteller. So like it's kind of like that, you know, that joke, like I'm always trying to get a Dungeons and Dragons game together and nobody can get the time, you know.
Yeah.
I'm always that guy that's kind of like, so we're gonna play? Are we playing? What are we playing? You know, and everyone was kind of like, oh yeah, we'll do something, we'll do this, we'll do that. And I was just always going creating the stories. And I have an obsessive personality. I know I do. Shout out to my wife for putting up with that shit. But it's really that obsessive, like I love creating. Like my mind just races with these ideas. Like I literally can't help but create 24/7 all the time, no matter where I'm at. I'm always thinking about something. I'm always writing something down. I'm one of those people. I have a million notebooks with a million ideas, and I'm always jotting something down because the last one wasn't good enough, and you know, and making this character. And then I'm writing a journal. Journals are my big thing. I write journals of the way that the character speaks and thinks and what they would say about a certain scenario. And then I'm like, rubbish, and I go to the next one. So I was always this guy that's always creating. And then it started becoming, okay, so what games do I want to play, right? I'm looking at this. There's a lot of amazing games out there. Like in my mind, Night Realms is the top tier for me, high fantasy game, especially in the area. Jesus Christ, especially in the area. But I'm talking like period. To me, it's just like top notch. And I'm like, okay, so there's high fantasy, there's Night Realms. You know what I mean? All right, so I'm at the time when I was looking for something, like, okay, so let me see if there's some kind of cyberpunk game, or let me see if there's a, you know, obviously Dystopia Rising was something that I was heavily a part of for years, so that genre is there, you know. And I was just like, what do I want to do? And I was really trying to think of where my niche was going to be. But I'm like, I want to play something, you know, I want to do something. But I felt like as a player, I was always there was always a ceiling of, okay, but I'm creating within this world still, but I kept creating other worlds always. And it was really, you know, Paula, who was just kind of like, you know, I think I forget what we were doing. I know what I was doing. I was writing another game. I was actually writing a vampire game. And I was like, this is it. This is the one. And this was like a year and a half to 2 years ago. And I'm like, this is it. I mean, I had character sheets. I had like a test run of like 10 people who were going to come over to the house. We were doing it in October. It was going to be fucking great. And she was just like, you know, in passing, she was just talking, and she mentioned something about, you know, it'd be great to have like witches. And I was like, witches, that's kind of dope, you know? Like, I mean, it's done. It happens. Like, there, like you go to other games, there's warlocks, there's mages. But she's like, no, I'm talking like witches. I'm like, that'd be cool. So then, you know, just kind of digging and then thought about the Salem Witch Trials, and that started going crazy because that happened. But I'm like, but what if? And that what if was it. That was the pebble in the lake, and it caused the ripples. And I was like, but what if like these girls weren't lying? Like what would happen if there really was stuff going down? What, you know? So that's why we, in our game, we call it like I just coined this random ass term. I called it a mirror LARP because it's basically, or shadow LARP, but I call it a mirror LARP. But it's pretty much, so you know what happened in 1693 in America. You know what's happened. You know what the Salem Witch Trials are. But as opposed to saying this is it, and this is Betty Page, and you know, this is Tituba, you know, and these type of like, this is it. You know, we created this world where, okay, you know, obviously humans, there's these different castes that they had there. They're your starting walks of life, and then it becomes, okay, but this happened. But this happened. So there really was something, and just kind of running from there. But we changed some things because we didn't want it to just be like, oh yeah, you read a history book and it's not a recreation, it's not a reenactment. We want our players to realize that they are the story. So that's why I always have little quotations when I say centered around the 1693 Salem Witch Trials. So there's those Puritan type characters, but you know, our faith isn't the regular faith, because the gentleman Michael Guardino, who again I will shout him out, is an unreal storyteller. Is a very religious man, and I was kind of like, okay, you know, I was like, I don't want in any way to offend your faith, and I was like, so how can we do this? How can we make this right? And his first thing was kind of like, get rid of the crosses. Done. Easy. This is a game. Done. Made a circle. you know,
Mhm.
done. We did it as a joke and it became a thing, you know, done. And then it became like, well, what's the name? So we just call it the faith because it's this thing. And then God, you know, he calls her, it's a female, he calls her she above all. And it has the same flavor, has everything that you know about the Puritan life and this and that, except we didn't want to create those things that would potentially cause trouble for some players to be like, screw your faith. And then that creates an out of game animosity where like, ugh, I shouldn't have said that, you know? Like that felt kind of weird, you know? We wanted to be accepting of all different kinds of magical practices because like one of my favorite facts is Techubo, who's one of the first witches to be burnt. She wasn't even what people would consider the traditional witch. She was actually a voodoo practitioner and she was Arawak like I am. So I just thought it was great. I'm like, holy shit, like, wait, what? Like she wasn't, I was thinking like she was like some traditional witch. They're like, no, they're like, she was a slave. They're like, no, it was like, there was like, it was their Indian slave that they blamed. I'm like, no, and she was Arawak, and really, technically, she would have practiced voodoo. She didn't practice the traditional theory of, and that's what opened my eyes. And I'm like, there's other things. Like we only have our way of viewing this particular ideology. So boom. So now the occultists, they're practitioners of anything. If it doesn't matter if you're a shaman, it doesn't matter if you know you're a witch. It doesn't matter if you're a conjurer. You know, so we just added these aspects and like it took like me having to get that, you're right, that itch. You had to scratch it, like you with your, you know, with your stories, like you're saying you're a writer, you're a creator, you know, did that play a part in making that decision, like saying like, okay, but I also need to tell my story?
I absolutely, a lot of like, yeah, a lot of what I like doing is really delving into the world and like building the world story and the kind of those deeper aspects to it. And on the topic of like doing religion, doing culture, and especially when it comes to like pulling from the real world, or more specifically like being inspired by the real world in creating those. I get like it's always a very tricky thing because you want to do justice, and I'm about as clear as they come. So like I have so I have a lot to pay attention to, and like a lot that I just genuinely, I'm not the right person to write it. And so I need that outside help for making it work. But I want to make those inspirations feel like something people can be proud of and latch onto and really hold on to that. And what I love about the design of like the way the congregation is written, because I've literally got the page open on my other monitor here.
Hey.
Is that it's vague, but it's clear. It gives a lot of room to play that Puritan America fear of the woods, fear of the dark, fear of what's unclean, with still not diving into the really like horrible traumas that came from the way Puritan America treated people, and like Puritan faith treated people. So it still evokes the aesthetic, the feeling of what you want out of it, while still allowing people who want to treat it with respect to do so. And I think that's really important for any, like, especially with the way you've got these things written, with any of the ways, like I'm currently sitting going through every single culture that we've got in the Night Realms world, going back through, redoing them over and over again until it's finally at that point where someone can look at it and go, this is good. Like, because you really want to make sure that you're not just caricaturizing all of it. Like you said with the guy who's writing the congregation, like you don't want to caricaturize Christian faith. That's even, it's bad.
It's even worse.
It's not good for people. Like, people believe in that, and they don't want their faith, their culture, their life to be a caricature.
Absolutely.
But it takes the good inspiration from it, because you've got the Almighty in there, the monotheistic religion that allows for a lot of open-ended belief, which does fit and does kind of evoke the good feelings that you can get out of those things. And so like that kind of thing specifically is really one of the big things I care most about when running and writing is being able to have somebody look at something and go, I see the inspiration of my life in there, and it's being celebrated. And that's like something I love so much when being able to build these things.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. And thank you for that. Honestly, thank you for that. That was really our big concern. As an Indigenous American, my big thing is always about, appropriation and things of that nature, but also representation. You still want to be represented. You still want your stories to be told, but there's different ways to tell them. It's a LARP. It's a LARP. So people will always find their ways to dip into the gray, into the black. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have to write it into a story. Like, for those of you who don't know, this might be your first game, we don't have to write evil characters or evil backgrounds. Like, the players will do that themselves very well. You can give them the most vanilla, commoner, Farmer Bob guy, and then you're gonna find out like he hung his family. Like, the players do it. Like, it's just what they like. We don't need to write it in. We don't need to write it. Like, I don't need to be like, oh, and by the way, this is how the entire cast acts, or the entire race, or the entire class, in any other game. Like, you don't have to write that. Your players will do that themselves. Shout out to everybody who literally just side-eyed their character background right now and because and then my mother passed. I was the only child, and we all do it. We all do it. So, like, we could create that world where it's like, listen, this is where it is, but do that. If that's you, if that's your character, then that's what they are. We wanted to give you that scope, that when you look at all this. So I was talking to somebody else, and they were saying, you know what I like about your game? They said there is no clear bad guy. And I said, word. That was the point, because you're the bad guy. Like, whoever you are, the person that I'm talking to, it's you. I know it. You know what I mean? It's like, it creates itself. It's situational, like, evil is not born, it's made, like that kind of ideology. So
I mean, especially
it's really cool.
Especially with the moral gray game, like, everybody is somebody's bad guy.
Exactly. You could be the best guy ever. There's gonna be somebody in LARP who's plotting to rob you, who's plotting to steal your shit, who's planning to kill you, like, whatever, like, extort you. It's a game, and that's what people do. Because I heard it best one time. It's like, it's American culture, as horrible as it sounds, you know what I mean? Like, we're bred on winning, you know what I mean? Like, we play Monopoly, we played Parcheesi, you play, how many you find joy in slapping that draw 4 on somebody in Uno? You know what I'm saying? Like, we like winning. Like, people like winning, and I get it, and we understand it, and it's a wonderful feeling, and it's a wonderful thing, but it's just a general fact of all LARPs, like, anybody like, yes, I'm a culprit of it. I love games that are play to live, but you know what? It's always fun to also have a rad character, you know what I mean? And really put yourself in the shoes of somebody, and take different aspects of yourself and see how you can amplify that and bring that to the table, and sometimes that goes, hey, why don't I make somebody, a little morally gray? Hey, let me make somebody super good. Let me make somebody super bad. And sometimes it just takes dipping your foot. I will never forget when I played Night Realms and I applied to play a Dark Elf. In my mind, I'm like, Drow, this is amazing. I love the Drow culture. It's like, it has a creepy aspect. It's matriarchal. It had all these things. And I could not have been approved for that at like the worst in-game time. I think you guys were at war with the Underdark, like, this was like a million years ago, as I did it. And I'll never forget it, because my character's name was Draven. And I guess Cinder had a relative who was super bad, whose name was Draven. And when I came into game, people thought I was playing him. You know what I mean? And that that just turned my whole view of like, oh, I'm gonna be like this kind of, it's like, no, nah, bro. Like you putting yourself in those shoes gives you a totally different mentality as to why people do things, how they do things, and how people are looked upon. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that is really, 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 really dope.
There's definitely, I mean, game, like when you look at, speaking on Americans and that we play games to win, there is totally the dynamic that basically you set it when you build your game, and you manage that expectation from the start. Like, you make games, you've got your monomyth hero games where the goal is for the heroes to overcome the adversity. And they're like, the expectation from the start is the heroes will win. That's the purpose of the game. And so you have that expectation, that pre-negotiated determination from the start, that this is a game where you're playing to win, in like the collaborative, you like player versus the environment setting.
Sure.
Then you have Vampire the Masquerade, which is built on PvP. It is player versus player social PvP. But then you get but like, there you go. You've got the setting that sells the vibe of it. So when you've got things like this where there is no clear winner, there's no clear bad guys, no clear good guys, you can set that expectation of it being a game about the collaborative story where everybody's playing for the answer, rather and it almost becomes the person versus self kind of storytelling versus the like any of those others, because at the end of the day you're going, am I the bad guy?
Yeah, there it is. You pretty much said it right there, like player versus self, and really realizing like, oh, it's me. You know, like I always joke and say, you know, every group of friends has an a-hole. You know what I'm saying? If you don't know who that friend is in your group of friends, it's you. You know what I'm saying? Like, so it's that same thing. You're looking around, who's the bad guy? Who's the villain? Oh, wait. Yeah, I guess I did that. Yeah, that's on me. You know? So that's freaking awesome. So right now, I know, because you were saying there's a lot of things, you know, that you've been working on time-wise and everything because of the pandemic and everything. So is there anything as far as Night Realms is concerned that you would love to shout out? Maybe something that you might want to talk about, maybe some little behind-the-scenes thing that you haven't talked about yet that you might want to let your people know about?
I mean, for the big things that we've been working on recently is James and I spent who knows how long making maps of every place in the game world. Great program if you ever get a chance for it. Incarnate does wonders for being able to build maps of your game world. It's incredibly versatile. The options on it are phenomenal. And it really helped us create the world that we wanted to visualize, and it helps us better tell that story. Honestly, the thing I'm most proud about is the fact that we got that world anvil put together so that if James and I are ever in a car accident and never seen again, Night Realms won't immediately fall apart when nobody knows anything. But like, for the most part, it's a lot of our work right now has been plugging away at building our basically prestige lists, the higher lists, like those niche like epic level lore roles. We've been plugging away at that. As a side project, one of the things we started doing, since we're licensing out the game now, people, like when you mentioned earlier, we've got a Maryland game. That's our first license. They bought the product. They're now running a Night Realms chapter down in Maryland, but it's its own game setting. And so one of the things we're doing, and one of the things I kind of started working on, a while back, like a year or two back, we made our first kind of AU verse, like our new another universe to play in, because we wanted to do parlor games as well. And so we made the like Arcana Punk Darklight game setting. So one of the other things I started working on is I was driving in my car and a song came on, because that's how it all starts. It's always that one.
Of course, yeah.
A song came on my Spotify, and it's one of my like kind of old like dark Western playlists, like that like dark, like Southern gospel kind of dark country, which I really love. But the song was basically about an undead, like an undead who walks into a bar, challenges a guy to you either drink, like go shot for shot with me, or we duel, and like that's the song.
Sure.
It's a cool
Okay.
song. And so I was like, yeah, but what about a Western game? Let me get on it. And so so one of my side projects right now is building a Western themed kind of universe to make as a game setting.
That is awesome. So this is just like at the very like grassroots beginning of you just kind of mulling around the idea and kind of just finally putting pen to pad and creating this universe.
I've got like a couple pages on it so far. I have the like map of the world that I built. And so a lot of it's basically, I'm making it so that it's just another product for us to sell. If another game wants to be like, I want to use these rules, but I like the Western setting. Great, here you go. And so I want to make, like, for me, it's making those side projects, those other universes that people can play in, those other worlds, those different settings, so that we have something for everyone.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, you were saying that you're changing the settings. Now, are the rules going to stay the same? Like, is this like almost like a fantasy, like high fantasy Western, like, or are we talking like traditional Western using similar rule set to Night Realms?
The setting I built is designed to use the high combat, like buffer rules setting that we've got for Night Realms, and it's still built in a way like the fantasy aspect of it is really how you present the story. It's thematically, it's still like narratively, it's still a very low fantasy kind of setting. It's still the like that dark, dismal Western where everyth's barren, but you still get the value of playing those supernatural things in that, but it's a little tweaked. It's a little more like Weird West versus the high fantasy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's dope. Now, I actually have a question. I want to kind of like piggyback a little bit from this, because thinking about, just starting a game from grassroots and Night Realms. So I know you guys have fixed this, because I've heard, because you hear things, and I love it, and I love this. This is a great fix, but because your game is big, you have a very, very, very big game, and a lot of situations that a lot of big games fall into is that level gap. And I heard that this was fixed beautifully, actually, by a lot of players. So congratulations on that. But my question to you really is from a grassroots standpoint. How, like, it's like, it's to me like a new content creator. Like, how did you fix it? Was that more story based? Was that more number crunchy based? Like, how do you kind of mitigate that?
So it depends on the kind of, honestly, it's always going to depend on the kind of rules you have. For us, the original rule set, I don't believe was set for a game that was going to run 20 years. The power creeps up, and it's always going to, as long as you have a game that has scaling power, there's always going to be a point where the top end is way too much. And I remember the point at which we hit that, and we finally, like, the weekend before we dropped the new rules, at least like the first iteration of us really muscling through it, because it really was like a 3-year process to finally get to where we're at now. And I'll get into that. But that last event before we did that, I was standing on the field of the last fight, the big fight of the weekend, and I realized my presence here is detrimenting everyone else, because like I'd been playing the game for 12 years by that point. I was way too high level. Like the creep had gotten in. I was too strong. My presence detrimented, and that's not a game that that's not going to subsist. Like that's not going to live for very long in that way. It's going to implode on itself.
Right, not a high shelf life, right?
And so one of the things that we did to bring that gap down is the dynamic in which leveling happens now, and the way you buy things is, it was a very number crunchy thing. For every skill, basically it came to, for every skill you buy, the next one's going to be more expensive. And so you can get up quickly. It takes the low end and brought it up, and takes the high end and brought it down. So the whole thing kind of switched towards the middle. And so the dynamic really allows for those low level characters to interact with the high level characters in a way that doesn't make them feel completely out of sync. Like, you're not going to have somebody who's literally invincible walking on the field with somebody who's going to die if somebody looks at them the wrong way anymore. There's a lot more of the middle ground. And so the progression, it really was a very number crunchy kind of change to make that work. And will this last us 20 years? I don't think so. But, and I say that because do I think any game rule set should last 20 years? Absolutely not.
You got to move with
Culture
the times.
changes. Yeah, culture's going to change. The game's going to change. The people who play it are going to change. And the rule set is not going to match that anymore. It's the same way for the way you play in the games. Like we were talking earlier that, you know, we had the old mentality of once that layout was called, you're in it. There's no negotiating. Whatever happens is what's happening. But now we're at a point where gaming culture has said we negotiate what we're doing. So the rules follow the same suit. New culture, new generations happen. Over time, the rule set is not going to match what the gaming culture wants. And so the biggest struggle is accepting that your rules will change. No matter what happens in 10 years, in 5 years, in 20 years, they're going to change. And you just have to live with that. And that's okay.
Absolutely.
Even though people hate change. Like everybody hates it when your rule set changes because they got to relearn it. But like,
yeah, I was going to say, the same people who hate the change though are going to be the same people who are going to be benefiting from it later. So it's kind of like the lesser of two evils. Like, listen, you're going to, like I told my wife, you're going to be mad at me right now, but you're going to love me tomorrow. Like, it's going to be one of those, it's like, this is for the better. This is what's for best. So if we got to change these rules, we got to adapt. And one thing that I love, and again, thank you again for this, is having these kind of open dialogues, I feel, with content creators, and especially in a platform where we're held accountable by our words, and that people are going to hear this. There's people in here right now that are listening to this, where they're kind of like, okay, that's really, that's the underlying thing. And I keep saying, I wanted to peel back that veil. I wanted to open that curtain so people realize these are conversations that are being had. These are concerns. Because sometimes when you get to a level when you're like, franchise out the wazoo, 1 million games deep, 1 million players deep, and if a player feels that way, it's like, you got to understand where this content creator is at right now, where their head is at, where their motivation is at. They're here for you. It doesn't matter if they're just coming into the mix, or it doesn't matter if they're 23 years in almost. At the end of the day, communication amongst your people, your audience, your target, it is key, because they are what's creating it. Without them, we're just going to be telling stories to our notebooks. You know what I mean? So having these kind of dialogues, these kind of conversations, I think it's going to keep it fresh. It's going to keep it true, and it's going to keep it honest, where people go hold accountable, like, hey man, but at the same time, they're seeing we're doing things, that things are being done. And that was another one of my big pushes to do this, because as somebody who is trying to create a game, I do get some messages on the side, even as just sort of like, hey, where you at? What are you doing? What's this? What's that? And it's kind of like, look, wheels are turning, wheels are definitely turning, content's being put out. But, as somebody who's been doing this and been in the game for a while, things take time, like you were saying, it took 3 years to really get what you wanted to do with that, the number system down. It's, right now you're jotting down an amazing game. People heard that right now, about the Western games. So now, you can have people like me, like,
so what can I play cowboy?
So what about this Dark Cowboy though? Like, there's like it's a thing, it happens. So it's cool that, all these dialogues and everything are kind of going on. So I know there's a bunch of people here also that I've been watching, love you all. Thank you all for that. And, thank you. God, I've been in so many random Zoom meetings now. I feel like the fact that nobody has said a word is like crazy. You know what I mean? Like if a business meeting was only this good, right? So if anybody has any questions for either me or for Steve, if you have questions about his amazing game, or my crazy game that we have going on with my crazy team, feel free to unmute yourselves and ask away, because I would love to, like, if you guys have any questions for him or questions for me, And if not, that's cool. But if you do, please just let us know. And if not, that's fine too. All right, I think everybody's going to be solid and cool, which is so. Steve, you've been awesome, dude. Thank you so much for rolling with the punches with this crazy stuff. I promise you, the next time we do this is going to be a whole lot smoother from beginning to end for us.
Look, I'm sold. I'm happy to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I promise you, I'm going to that game. Just so you know, and you got to torture her, Paula has never been to a fantasy game, period. She's only ever done the Dystopia Rising, Mudfia, and now this. So she's been wanting to do high fantasy, and I told her Night Realm is the one. So
we're ready for it. Let's go.
All right.
So let's go,
let's go.
I'll let you know when live comes back.
Right, exactly. So before we sign off, is there any little quick shout out you want to give, or any little website you want to plug, or plug Night Realms or something, please?
I mean, currently, pandemic's happening, so we're not. I mean, we don't stop. The game's still running, not live, but we have incredible teams working right now, keeping online content going. We've got. I couldn't name everybody. There's so many people constantly working on building tabletop games, whatever, to keep everybody entertained every month when our weekends are supposed to be going on. And so it's definitely a shout out to all of our teams working hard at keeping Night Realms playing, keeping the game world going while we can't.
Awesome. So also what I want to do is, once again, my backbone, Paula, Matt, Mike, thank you so much for doing all the work that you're putting through. Everybody who's been coming through the website, I look at the traffic obnoxiously all the time. Thank you guys so much for actually coming on, asking your questions in the DMs the way that you do, and all of these private messages and such. We do have a whole bunch of content coming out. Guys, also, I mentioned it in the other little quick thing that when I was trying to get everything going on Facebook Live, but I want to mention it again. If you go on to the trialslarp.com, there's a little pop-up that comes up right at the beginning. That's where our monthly newsletter. That newsletter is my one-toe in-game, one-toe out-of-game newsletter that we've been putting out. We have a lot of flavor text that's in there, a lot of Easter eggs for how the game is going to go, and different stories that will totally matter when we get this thing up and going and we beat this pandemic. So I definitely would ask for you guys to check that out if you want. We definitely got the merch coming on. All of the proceeds that we have for these t-shirt sales right here are going to go directly into us starting our game for the first time. So if you want to support in any way, please do. If not, just thank you for listening, because as a content creator and as somebody who puts out information, the fact that you guys are even listening is really what matters most. So Steve, again, thank you so much for your time, my friend.
Yeah, no problem. Like I said, I'm happy to come back.
Awesome, dude. So I will talk to you later, and everybody will talk later. Bye.